Hello and welcome back to my channel Rover Turbo. This is the next video on the mini engine. I'll put a link up here to the video that I did before on removing the mini engine, how to remove the mini engine. And then this video is going to be me stripping the engine down, doing the timing chain, putting it all back together basically. It's been a while, but here it is. So it didn't go right, some lessons learned, what you shouldn't do. So you'll see in the video, so let's get cracking. Cheers. I'll probably run it initially without putting any of this on. It sounds like it's got no compression, which is not good. Right, I just thought I'd do an update just to show you where I am with this, because I'm not quite sure how I'm going to put this into a video, because I've done a video on how to take an engine out of one of these, but what I wasn't going to do and what I haven't done is a video on timing, because there are loads of videos on YouTube on timing, so I wasn't going to do another one on timing. But what I'll do, just to kind of create a video on what I'm doing, I'll just show you the basics, just, you know, if you want a quick overview of what needs to be where, if you're just, you know, looking to time one of these up, because this is now done as far as it can be for now. Unfortunately what I've done is I've snapped off, this is an oil feed, which is supposed to be like a stick that sticks out of there, and it goes in there, and it basically sprays oil on the chain. It's quite a common BMW thing. Unfortunately, when I was trying to undo this, the chain was flapping about and it snapped. So this is all basically put back together. We've got the new tensioner on, that's tension, the new guide's on, there's a guide in here, and there's a guide that goes up here, which is pushed on by this piston that goes in here, so that pushes on this guide here, which tensions this chain up. So basically it's quite simple how as long as you've got a timing kit. So the timing kit, basically the two main pieces of the timing kit that you need are the timing pin, which goes in the back. There's a plug that goes in here, plastic plug that you pop out, and then the pin goes through, it goes through there, it goes through the plate, and it goes into a notch in the back of the flywheel. And in the back of the flywheel there's a notch that timing pin, not that one, that one. So what I did is, before I took anything apart, I timed it up. They do give you a little bit of allowance when you're doing the final timing, which is why these are slotted. It gives you once it all, because unfortunately you can only time it with the plate and the flywheel on. So it's a bit, you have to take it off and on and off and on. It does come with this, which is a locking tool, but it's pretty fucking useless, to be honest with you. Why didn't they make it so you can lock it in the timed position? You can't lock it in the timed position. It's ridiculous. You have to take it out of time to lock it. So that you have to take the sump off. So the sump has to come off before you can get this plate off. You probably could get the plate off and then take the sump off, but there's no point. You need to take the sump off to get to the chain, the pump chain, because the pump chain sits at the front and the other chain sits at the back. So you have to take the pump chain off with the sprocket at the bottom, which is a reverse thread. So you have to go tighty to loosen it. So you have to take the sump off, pump chain, sprocket off, pump chain off, to be able to get to all this down here. So what I basically did is with the flywheel and the plate on, I timed it up, and you see a couple of marks here. So these line up. There's a mark that I made there for a reference point. Okay, so once that's timed up, the pins in, you can then carefully take the flywheel off, and you can carefully take the flex plate off. Now there's a mark here on the sprocket. This is a new sprocket. It comes with the kit. The kit that I bought come with a new pump sprocket and a new cam sprocket, and obviously the chains. And then it lines up with this little nipple inside here. So that means you can basically strip everything apart. You have to take out that bolt there, because they hold this tensioner, sorry, this guide that goes in here. So putting it all back together, you need to put the main chain on first at the back, which is the thicker of the 3 chains, which goes on this sprocket. This sprocket is got a keyway in it, so you can't put the sprocket on wrong. It will only go in one position because it has a slot on it. In the kit they give you a special, this thing here, that is like a little mini pillar, because on the inside of here it's threaded. So what you basically do is take this bolt out, you wind it in a couple of threads, and what you need to do is you need to hold the bolt behind while tightening this up, because this will tighten the nut up behind it as you tighten it up, and it won't work if you do that. So you need to hold the bolt in the position that you put it in, a couple of threads in, and then screw this in until it goes tight. Okay, now the idea of this tool, because they give you this as well, is what happens is as you tighten this up, it screws it into the sprocket, and then the bolt head, this bolt head bottoms out on the inside of here. You can see the marks there, look. And what that does effectively is it pulls that off of the, because it's also tapered. So this won't come off unless you use this tool, or you remove the pump bolts and whack it from this side. I've seen people do that, but it's obviously a lot quicker if you've got the correct tool. Okay, and then obviously you can then replace the sprocket and the chain. So the chain is slotted. There's a slot, there's a keyway on it, so it'll only go on one way, and time it up. If it's all timed correctly, then this will line up with that nipple at the back. This was slightly out of time when I timed it up, I think because the chains had just stretched, but that's irrelevant. So yeah, you need to put the main chain on, which is the thicker chain, and then you can put the pump chain on, put that back together, put the guides in, and then you can put this top one in. And then you also get this tool here, which basically slots over the cam, and it sits flat there, and it sits flat at the back there. So this has actually got to sit flat, and also through here, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, and on the back side of those cogs, can you see on that right hand one you've got 2 little dots, and on the left hand one you've got 1 dot. So they need to line up together. So this all happens obviously when you time it up, you know, from the start. So those 2 dots lined up, and this metal plate slotted on. Okay, so that's timed. So you need to put this guide in first. This, it just slots onto that, it doesn't screw through that screws through that. Put this guide in first, then you put the chain on this sprocket. You take the sprocket off, this is a replacement sprocket, and you thread the chain with the sprocket down through here, and then you hook it on there. Now this has got to be in the middle of the slot, okay, like that. So these are just loose, these bolts are just loose, okay. So everything is correctly timed. This is timed, the tensioner pin's been pulled out, the new tensioner in there has been screwed in, that's timed, and I also put a mark on there as well. So I timed it off, timed it up. You can also put the flywheel back on, and the plate, and the flywheel back on, just temporarily, just to check that you've got everything in the correct position. But as long as it's roughly correct, all your marks are roughly in the right position, this is, you do your final timing position once everything's back together. Okay, so this is all, I've got to now wait for this to come before I can do anything now. So obviously I've cleaned everything off there, cleaned everything behind there because it was just black. I've got to clean that up, put a new oil seal in it, and obviously that's got to be stuck back on here before the sump, and then that all needs to be siliconed on. Silicone goes on, new oil seal, then the flywheel can be bolted back on. Then I can then double check my timing, so my timing pin can go in the back of my flywheel, and everything can be double checked. Once that is all, the bottom end is perfectly in time, this is in place, you then do up these 3 bolts. That's it. It's quite simple if you know the steps to follow. It's a bit fiddly trying to work out what you have to put in the right order, and what chain goes where, because that's another thing that I didn't realise was the 2 chains, these 2 chains are roughly the right length. It doesn't tell you what chain's which, so it's obvious when you look down here that this is a thicker chain than this one. So there you go. I've also ordered a seal kit. I didn't quite realise that you had to take quite as much apart as I have. So the injectors have to come out, so all the fuel common rail has to come off, the injectors have to come out, they come out really easily. The inlet manifold has to come off, but it is just sort of loose here. I had to move this bracket out of the way. I just undone 1 bolt and rotated it around and done it up to be able to get to this bolt for the guide, otherwise you can't get to it. Inlet manifold off, some brackets and stuff you can just remove off of there. So all this needs to be cleaned up. It all needs to be put back together with new seals, new injector seals, new inlet seals, new rocker cover seals, and obviously the gearbox needs to go back on, the clutch and everything needs to go back on, and obviously not in this order, but the sump needs to be cleaned out, it's re-siliconed and put back on. So I'll pick the camera up, and also need to replace the condenser. I've got one of those on order, but I mentioned that before. And don't forget, 2 things not to forget. Do not forget to do up those 3 bolts after you fully timed it, and that reductor ring, that pickup, which goes on the end of the snub before the flywheel goes on, which is the pickup for the crank sensor. Don't forget to put that on, otherwise it won't start. Well, I'm feeling pretty pleased with myself. It's 5 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, just ready for a beer, and the engine's back in. So waiting to go Paul on how to record a video, but I've just been cracking on, just trying to get it done. So it's all back in basically, so everything is all reconnected up here. All the injectors are back in with new seals, all this is back on, new inlet manifold seals, new rocker cover seal. I replaced the seal behind here. It wasn't leaking, but it's quite a common thing on these BMW, Mercedes engines, blah blah blah. There's a rubber gasket behind there and they just go all hard. So I thought I would just, while I'm here, I would just take that off and redo that. New flywheel, the old flywheel's over there somewhere. It was a bit wibbly wobbly, and I didn't want to take the risk of it rattling obviously when I put it back together. So it's new flywheel. It was 450 quid from GFS car parts. I kept the original clutch in there, there's nothing wrong with it. At the end of the day, I'm not just throwing money at this car. There's no point in me replacing the clutch. It was another 200 quid. New slave cylinder because it was leaking, so that's on there. So it's on its 2 engine mounts, but that's it. It's literally just gone in, and now I obviously need to do the task of connecting everything back up again in a methodical order. Gearbox oil, I might try and fill it from here. There's like a little vent here. It'll probably take forever to do it through there, but if I just put in its capacity through that hole, that's the only hole I've got without going underneath at the back where there's actually the level bung. New condensers over there has got to go in there. I'll probably run it initially without putting any of this on. So I'll get it, the basics connected, like the gear linkages, the gearbox oil, the drive shafts, the electrics, the ECU, everything else like that. And then I'll get everything as much as I possibly can connected here, and then put the front panel on. I just want to know that it sounds all right. Don't forget oil. Need to put something on somewhere to remind me to fill it up with oil. So yeah, there you go. Well happy about that. Hopefully it'll be fine. So next day, I've got everything done that I wanted to get done. So slave cylinder is in, the exhaust is connected, the drive shafts are in, they're in the hubs. I haven't put the bolts back on the lower arms. The stabilizer bar is on the back, the fuel lines are in, so the engine is in, proper, bolted. All of the electrics are connected, the main battery terminal is connected, the earth's connected, the airbox is temporarily put back in, the ECU's in, this is in, gear linkages are in, the gearbox has got oil in it. It takes 1.9 litres I believe, so I'll put about 2 litres in it. I'm not going to connect the front panel, so hopefully it will run without the intercooler on, because the airflow sensor won't detect any airflow. But hopefully it will run enough for me to run it just to see for a few seconds, 30 seconds or so, just to see obviously if it's okay. I'm not going to put the whole front back on if it's still running like a dog. So hopefully it won't start up immediately because there's no fuel in any of the injectors or injector lines. That will give enough time for the pump to start pumping oil around before it actually starts. So the battery is connected, so literally this is go time. So wish me luck. Right, well, I don't know whether you heard that. It started up and then cut out, which doesn't surprise me. But what does surprise me now is it sounds like it's got no compression. Which is not good. Why would it have done that? So there you go. I just listened to the video back, and it didn't make any unusual noises. It didn't seem to, you know. I'm fearing the worth and the timing slipped. That's what I think it is. But I just can't see for the life of me how it could have slipped. I mean, a lot of people forget to do up that top, the top pulley, the cam pulley. After you've finalised it, you put the time and you time it up and you do those last 3 nuts up. What I've heard, a lot of people forget to actually tighten those up, but I double checked and made sure they were gunned them up, and then I obviously checked them all by hand. They were tight, and they were tight. Could it be the cheap and nasty, crappy timing kit? I mean, they give you a new sprocket. I mean, did it slip on that because it's a crap sprocket? I honestly don't know, but whatever happens, it's almost a pile of scrap now, isn't it? Because now it's a massive job to check the timing. So all of the injectors have got to come out. So all of the injectors have got to come out. This has got to come back off. This has got to come off. To get the fuel rail out, you have to undo this bolt down here to get this pipe out of the way. So this, and then those two bolts, all the injectors have to come out, and then you can get to all the bolts on the cam cover and take the cam cover off. And then obviously, I'm assuming you can take that plug out under. I'm probably have to do it from underneath. Put the pin in the hole, lock it at the bottom, and obviously then check everything up here is timed up, because if it isn't, then what's happened is the chain slipped on the sprocket. It says, you know, all the tensioners were all fine. You know, is it the tensioner? I mean, I'm babbling on. So I'm gonna have to take this apart now, and I'm gonna have to do it now because I can't leave it. It's 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. I'm gonna have to strip this all down now, which probably means I'm gonna have to renew all the injector seals as well, or at least dress them to reuse them. So, but even if I do check the timing, what then? What then? If there's something wrong with the timing, I've got to take the engine out again. I've got to take the engine out again. I had 100% confidence that this was going to be fine. Don't know why, I just did. So I don't know why I bother, I should stick to Astras and Corsas. So after you saw in that last clip, everything was doom and gloom and the end of the world. So I don't know whether I told you or not, but I checked the timing, and the timing is correct. I've taken the rocker cover off, injectors out, I've got underneath, taken the blank, I have told you all this, put the pin in, put that on, so it is all locked up. It is all locked up, it is timed, it's not that. So the only thing that I can think of, it is the hydraulic tappets. I don't know why it would be the hydraulic tappets, I haven't touched the hydraulic tappets, but I have spoken to a few people and they have said that it has happened a few times to them before when they've been doing any engine work and the tappets just jack up. Apparently something about the fresh oil being air in it, oxygen jet in it, whatever. They said just keep cranking it and it will eventually start, but anyway, I'm this far. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to take the cams out and take the hydraulic lifters out and reset them. So what that basically means is I've had to take a few bits out to get to the EGR cooler. The EGR cooler is going to have to come off so I can get to the tensioner at the back. I believe I've got this spanner that I need to take. So I'm going to de-slacken the tensioner. I'm going to zip tie the chain to the sprocket, and I'm going to get a bungee cord on the sprocket and hold it up on the bonnet. I'm going to undo these 3 bolts, take them out completely, and so the sprocket will then come away from the cams. Then the cam ladder is one piece which is held on, so this whole cam ladder will come out completely. So I can put that to one side and I can take off all of the rockers, all of the hydraulic lifters, and then squeeze them in the vise, give them a bit of a clean up, a brake clean, whatever, and then put them back in, and then hope, put it all back together obviously, and then hope that does it. So I've got the EGR valve / cooler off, which allows me to get to the tensioner, which is up there. This one was a 27mm, so I've used a 27mm because you only have a small gap in between there and the exhaust manifold. So I've zip tied the chain to the sprocket and a bungee cord. So now this is undone the 3 bolts, so that's now away. So in theory now I should be able to, this is still timed up at the moment, so I'll make sure it goes back, undo all the cam carrier bolts. Hopefully this should lift up. All of the bolts are off, this will just lift out. We need to take all of these rockers off. So this is the problem, I believe. I don't understand how it's happened, but I believe this is the problem. As you can see on this hydraulic tappet, Now what I believe happens is the oil comes up through the inside of where the tappet goes. It goes through this little hole, then it goes down inside the tappet, and there's a little one-way valve in there, and it fills up a chamber with oil pressure, and what that does is it expands and takes up the slack, or the valve, or the lash, I think they call it in America. It takes up the slack between the bottom of the cam and the rocker arm, and then I believe it then carries on through, and then it comes out of this hole at the top. Now this is obviously supposed to be a preset determined length depending on the gap in between the cam and the rocker. Now this is absolutely solid. I mean, I believe there is supposed to be some kind of give in this, so the theory is, I have watched a video of a bloke doing this, I don't know whether I might give it a go, is you push something sort of 1mm in diameter down there and you open the one-way valve, and then it allows you to compress all of the dirty oil out of the tappet. You can put it in a vise and you can crush it, but what you're doing is you're physically overriding the valve, which some say you shouldn't do, others say you should do, so there's no really other way around it. So it's probably happened the same in all of them. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put, like I'm trying to see if I've got a 1mm drill bit, push it in there and see if I can compress this by hand and get all the gooey oil out. Okay, so what I've already done, I didn't video it because I just haven't got the time, but I went through every single tappet. I had a pot and I put some diesel oil in it, and every single one was absolutely solid. You could not push it, and that's what you should be able to do, is to push it. I don't want this to ping out of my hand. You should be able to push it like that in the setup state. Obviously that's not what they do. Once they fill up with oil and they set themselves to whatever setting they need to be, then that's what they need to be. I don't understand, I still don't know why it's done it, but what I did is I got a 1mm drill bit, put it down there, and if you get it right in the sweet spot in the middle, it pushes down on the one-way valve and it allows you to push the piston in and all the oil comes out. So obviously what I did is I had it with both hands in the bath of diesel, and I was basically just, with that pin down there, I was basically pumping it, working it in and out, and what it does is it works the diesel through the lifter and spits out all the old oil. Now I didn't go mad on it, it's not super clean, but now all of them are all squidgy like that. So basically I've put them all back in. This is the last one, just thought I'd show you what I've been doing. So this one will allow obviously the valves to close properly. Before they obviously weren't. I don't understand why it was doing that. So I'm going to give this another quick clean on the mating surfaces. There's some new washers in the kit. I bought a head gasket kit, and there's some new rubber washers which go on here. I'll give these a bit of a clean, just rub them around in a piece of tissue basically, and I'll put it all back together. I'm not going to show putting it all back together, but I'll get it all back together, time it all up correctly. It's still locked in the flywheel, bolt everything up, put all the injectors back and put everything back together, and I'll bring you along for the ride to see whether it actually starts and runs this time. Everything's back together, rocker covers in, injectors back in, all the wiring's back in, everything's back how it was before. I haven't put a couple of things in, like these long pipes, because they're not connected to the intercooler anyway, so it's pointless. But the EGR's on, everything's reconnected. This is the moment of truth. Right, well, here we go. Got to connect the battery up. Hope to God this works, otherwise I'm going to be distraught. It's obviously going to be really, if it does start and run, it's going to be really clattery, obviously, because of the tappets, but as long as it runs, right, here it goes. Trying, it took a while to build compression there. Now I think it's got compression on a couple of cylinders and it's trying to go. The fact that it's got no mass airflow sensor stuff like that, it's probably not helping. Fuck yeah. Fucking happy. Sorry you missed it, but I was so pissed off. You haven't really missed anything, to be honest, but I'll tell you what I did in a sec after I've let it run a little bit. The sound seems to stop, as you can see, I've had to put the front end on. I think that was part of the problem. Seems to be running fine. Obviously I can't run it for too long. Right, let me turn it off. I think I've deserved a cup of tea. I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to have a cup of tea. And I'll explain what I did, which wasn't really anything, but I'll explain my thought of why I've done what I've done. Right, I made myself a cup of tea. I can't even remember what happened in the last video, the last clip we used. Basically, after it initially started, off, you know, with the cranking and cranking and cranking, building fuel pressure, it sounded fine. It then started for a split second, a second or two. I think it ran this time for a couple of seconds, and then cut out. And then when I went to try again, you probably hear on the video, it then went back to sort of sounding like it was before, and I was like, no, not again, what's going on? So it had something to do with the lifters. It must have had something to do with the lifters, because nothing else has changed. So anyway, so I left it for a bit and I went back to it, and then it sounded like it had a bit of compression, and it was chuffing out of the inlet manifold. So that would suggest to me that the valves were opening, the inlet valves were opening and stuff when they shouldn't have been, or partially. Anyway, I kept trying, put a bit of brake clean up in the inlet. That didn't make any difference. Then when I tried again, it started to sound like it had a bit of compression again, and it was almost trying to start. So I thought, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop because some vehicles are really, really sensitive about not having the circuit, the air circuit complete, because the airflow sensor, which is on the airbox, goes into the turbo and then goes round the turbo. It comes out of the turbo through this boost pipe, which wasn't connected to anything. It goes through the intercooler, back out, and into the inlet manifold. So if the engine's turning, and it's obviously should be pulling a vacuum on the inlet manifold, it's pulling air through the intercooler, through this pipe, underneath, into the turbo, round the turbo, out, and it's pulling air out of the airbox. Obviously this airbox, whether this sensor's plugged in or not, isn't detecting any airflow because it's not connected. So I thought, right, I'm just going to bung this on temporarily. It's not bolted on, it's just stuck in there. It's no bolts in it, and I connected the bottom intercooler hose, both intercooler hoses, tried cranking it again, and then eventually it's, you know, 2 cylinders, 1 cylinders, 3 cylinders, 4 cylinders started. Then it ran perfect. So that was the problem, I think, of it starting then cutting out because it didn't detect an airflow. Some cars will not run if it doesn't detect airflow. It doesn't matter what you do, if the intercooler's damaged, they'll start and cut out or whatever. So it could have been potentially, if I'd have connected all of this properly initially, that first time it started, it may have continued to run, and I wouldn't have had all of these problems. But that's hindsight for you. So what I need to do now is put that battery on charge. Obviously one at a time. I need to take the front panel back off because I've got to change the intercooler. Not the intercooler, the air condenser, the air con condenser. And I need to obviously connect all of the coolant hoses, put everything back properly, and then put the front panel on properly, then fill it up with coolant, and then run it up to temperature, make sure it's, you know, get it up hot, run it for, you know, half an hour, whatever. Then while it's doing that, I can obviously start putting things back together, like the headlamps and the bumper and stuff like that. So end of the day, I'm going to call it a day. So obviously I'm happy, but oh my god, why does it, well, you won't know this, I don't know what order stuff's coming out in, but I've got, prior to this, I've got 3 broken cars that I'm in the process of fixing in, which I thought were fixed, and then it turns out they're not. I might do a little video on all of those together, I don't know, because it's just buying broken cars that no one else wants to fix sometimes can be a minefield. So anyway, I'm going to sign off now. Don't know if this is the end of the video or not, but I shall see you in a bit. So update, the front panel is now on, condenser's in, all the pipework is connected, all the bolts are in but they're not tight, so all the bolts here, bolts underneath, intercooler's connected, radiator's connected, expansion bottle's back in, I've got coolant in it, all this is connected back up how it should be. Got that back on. So once it's back on the ground, I need to check the oil level. So I've had it up to, I've ran it up to, you know, I've had it running for 10-15 minutes. There's a bleed down there. That goes to the heater matrix. You'll have to bleed him, otherwise you get an airlock in the heater matrix. So obviously all the preps and stuff back on there. Everything's sort of located where it should be. So tomorrow, fresh day, I'll start it up again and I'll let it run for a little bit longer. And then I'll just need to put stuff back on, like the lower suspension arms, some cable clips and stuff in the brake lines and ABS stuff. Bolt the front panel back up properly, and then start putting it back together. Basically put all the clips where they need to be, bumper back on, headlamps, that kind of thing. And then just obviously need to check for leaks, stuff like that, oil leaks, obviously, you know, fluids. So yeah, so hopefully, and then it needs the fuel filter needs changing, and the pollen filter needs changing. It needs a check over. I have a feeling it might need some tyres, I'm not sure. Obviously it needs an inspection, and then it needs an MOT because this hasn't got an MOT. Yeah, so that's the next thing if all goes well.